Okay, welcome everyone to today's W4M Roundtable, hosted by Women for Mentors. Today's roundtable is titled Financially Fearless, Reset, Take Control, and Thrive. I'm really excited about this topic because this is something I think we all want to do. So we're really thrilled today. We have Susan Glass, founder of the Glass Group, and Carol Goins of the law firm of Carol Goins here with us today. Susan has dedicated her career to helping women regain their financial confidence and independence. We also have Carol Goins joining us to share her expertise as specializing in legal challenges. So we're going to dive into some tips for financial success, and we'll open up the floor to any questions anybody has at the end. And I would encourage any of our attendees to just feel free to use the chat room for questions that they have. So I'm Tiffany Foster, and I'm the president of Women for Mentors. And I'm joined here today with Ginny Overbay, Christine Foster, and we just are so glad just to have this opportunity to be able to create this community. W4M Roundtable is actually our mentorship outreach. And it's a space that we just want to have open conversation and dialogue for learning and growth to create support. Women for Mentors is a passion project, and we offer scholarships to women returning to education. And we just want to create this safe space where people feel like they have that support and encouragement to be able to take on the challenges of life as they come. So we believe that we rise together. And so we want to just encourage that anybody here today, if you know anybody that is going to be returning to education in the fall, to please just let them know about our scholarship. It is currently open and available to women returning to education that reside in Western North Carolina or Northeast Georgia. So before we jump in and get started, I just want to give a little disclosure because we are talking about financial discussions today, that while we do have these professionals with us today and they are available to connect with, and we will get to that at the end of this and they'll let you know how to get in touch with them. Any information shared here today at the roundtable is just for discussion purpose only. We are not offering any legal or financial or professional advice. So we just encourage that anybody always just consult with your own qualified advisor before making any actual decisions. So with that being said, we're going to jump on in. So I would like to first start. Hi, Susan. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you, Tiffany, for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And hi, Carol. I'm so glad that you're here. So let's start off, Susan. I'd like to just talk about, because this is your wheelhouse is helping people navigate, financial recovery and how to, grow their portfolios and do all that. So what do you think the first and most important step somebody should take when they're just starting over financially? Like where should they go? I think about times back, when I started over after my divorce, and it's like, what do you do? How do you navigate that to prepare for the future?
Great question. So I will tell you, in my experience, I find that we need to find out where the money's going, right? So a lot of times there's several different things that are out there that are in debt, credit cards, loans, what have you. And so getting a list of those items and kind of having a plan of starting to chip away at some of those debts is really important. I will tell you that one thing that I do with clients, and some of them love it and some of them hate it, but I ask them for 30 days. So let's say today's July 2nd. For 30 days, I give them the guidance of everything that you purchase, whether it's gas at a gas station, Starbucks, a package of gum, get a receipt for that and put it in a jar or in an envelope. And on August 2nd, we're going to pull out all those receipts and find out where exactly your money's going. Because it's kind of like when you're trying to lose weight and they tell you to write your food journal. Once you start to identify it, you're a little bit more conscious of where you're spending your money. And I find that really helps a lot. So really looking at a budget first and kind of really getting a landscape of where your finances are going is usually the first step that I take with women.
I absolutely love that. And I'm going to do that myself because I've sat down before and I've actually looked at different things, even just how much we spend on takeout, right? And
Right.
just kind of did a guesstimate of just, okay, if I average this and stuff, it wasn't even the concrete numbers. And I was grasping, clutching my pearls. Oh. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, but even things like that, like thinking about things like Starbucks, like the ones that we don't really consider, they're little things here and there. Do you find that people often are a little bit taken aback by what
Oh,
the totals end up being?
oh, sure. I had one client that did not realize she would go every day and after, well, not every day, but she'd go after like a certain workout and go get one of those protein shakes, that you see like an energy drink or those places that have those. And she would spend over $60 a month just on those drinks
Oh
in a
man.
month. She had no idea because she looked at it like, oh, it's $4 or $5. It's not a big deal. So she wouldn't really average that in.
Yeah.
And so I was like, maybe not every time you go work out, but maybe every other time because you still have to live and you still want to, you're working hard, you still want to do something for yourself. So it's just about moderation instead of going overboard. But those are the little things that add up that we don't even think about. I mean,
Yeah.
like subscriptions to Netflix and Hulu. And, I recently did that. And when you have a kid home from college, all of a sudden all those expenses go up. And I'm like, why do we have all these channels? So it's
Yeah.
things that you don't really think about and you're looking more about your power bill, but it's really all about your other little expenses that make a difference.
And that's interesting. That's a really great point too. I'm learning so much because I'm thinking about it and I'm like, wow, a lot of things like you sign up for it and you just do the auto renew. So like you
Right,
don't even really notice it. It just kind of comes out, it sneaks up, and then you get a random charge, a year later and stuff. And I've honestly been guilty of this where sometimes I see stuff pop up, I recognize it, but I'm like, oh, I don't really want that anymore. I'll deal with it. But then
right.
it's like I don't always deal with it right then, and then I forget.
Yeah. Get to the
Until,
next month, right?
yeah,
Right,
yeah. So, oh
right.
my gosh. Okay, I love that. That's a great place to start. So like, where with that, I mean, these are like the little steps, but where do you see that women are just making really the biggest financial missteps when they're rebuilding their finances? Because they're in their financial lives as they're looking at things and they're trying to grow. Where are the stumbling blocks people are coming across?
I think that a lot of times, women that I've worked with, they really feel that they need to go to investing first because they want to get professionally, they want to get professionally good at finance. So they'll put a lot of money immediately in investing so they can get ahead. And honestly, that's where a misstep is because it's more about looking at a strong foundation of stability and liquidity. Is really where I try to steer people to be like, we're going to get there, but we need to take these steps first. And so, it's looking for that fast return that sometimes no one can time the market. Nobody can make millions at the first trade or whatever that they might want to do. So it's really just taking the steps of looking at the overall picture and not going straight to, okay, I'm going to put all my whatever money I have available in investing each month.
So it's really coming down to, it sounds like it's more like there's no quick fixes, right? This
Absolutely.
more of like a long-term plan, long-term, growth instead of just instant gratification, which I know we all
We
want.
all want. Yes. We all want. Yes, we
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
We didn't get there overnight and
yeah,
we're not going to get out of it overnight, right? So
yeah.
it's taking one step at a time to really lay down the foundation, make sure the security's there, make sure the liquidity's there, and then we step up to the next, looking at retirement accounts and for the future.
Yeah, and I think too when you have, a life upset, something that happens and challenges you, like maybe you go through a divorce or what have you, and something rocks your world and you're sitting there looking at it. I mean, I'm sure because the stress that already comes with that of trying to figure out, okay, well now how do you start over? Because
Right.
oftentimes I would assume that's probably where a lot of people are. It feels like restarting over, readdressing it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and even whether people have a good leg up or not a very good leg up. So I love these though because I feel like some of these are so just practical. I'm like, I can do this. So I'm very excited about that. Um,
Right.
but with that in mind, Carol, I'd like to maybe turn over to you for a second and just see, like, because when we're talking about this, you see the legal side of it and some of those things that are getting people to these places where they are trying to navigate rebuilding and regrowing, and you see some of those legal challenges that often maybe might catch a woman by surprise, and they might not be thinking about. So is there anything that you would say are the things that maybe catch people by surprise that people just aren't thinking about because nobody's really prepared for that kind of life change, really?
Well, a couple of things kind of come to mind. And again, as you said earlier, everybody's case is different, unique to them. But just one thing that a lot of folks don't realize, and I can speak to North Carolina because that's where I'm licensed, but I think most states are at least similar, but we'll talk about North Carolina. When you marry, generally speaking, all of your assets and debts, all of the spouse's assets and debts then belong to the marriage. It's not my money, it's not their money, it's the marriage's money, and money and debts. And one thing I hear a lot, and people just get so upset, for example, and this kind of sometimes happens maybe with second marriages or later in life marriages. I have a house, I sold my house, and I put, let's just say $15,000, took money out of that, put $15,000 and down, and we bought a house together, right after we got married. And the other person didn't put any money down. Well, when you separate, you say, well, I want my $15,000. No, you took that money that was yours,
Mm-hmm.
and then you made it a marital asset. You're not going to get back dollar for dollar what you put in. Well, the other person, they didn't have a good job. They never made a payment. You married them. It was
Yeah.
all of it went into the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful, married or not married, about mixing credit. Um, you can be married. Women in America, at least for now, can have credit in their own names, married or not. If you marry someone who does not have very good credit, be careful about, I mean, you marry them is great, but be careful about co-signing credit cards and car loans and things like that, um, because that can bring your credit score down. Um, you can do a lot of things if you have pretty decent credit. Don't, be careful about overextending. Married or not married, people need to understand that. And I thought it was interesting what y'all were saying earlier about, keep a financial diary. What do I really spend? What do I really
Yeah.
spend it on? Well, I really don't need that. You know, I can go to McDonald's and get coffee. I don't have to go to Starbucks. That's a little bit cheaper, things like that, in terms of budgeting. And also, too, it, the reality of it is never, ever for anyone depend on paying your bills on child support or alimony or post
Mm-hmm.
separation support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are some people who will never be a day late or a dollar short, no matter what. I can name clients who were payors and clients who were recipients who it was every month. They're like, oh, here's my money. Oh, here's my money. But even with those conscientious, responsible individuals, life can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Someone can lose, they can have a great job. And again, we're not talking about the athletes and the actors and the CEOs of companies, but um, you can have somebody that has a very good job and then the company downsizes. God forbid they get in a car wreck and they can't work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they end up having another child and that gets factored into the equation. And so then what they were paying you maybe goes down some. And if that's what you say, well, I'm going to use that and I can pay my rent or my mortgage. and then it goes down even $50, that can be a problem. They're legally bound to pay it, and most do, contrary to what people say. Most do something, but you just never know when that day may come that they can't or won't pay for whatever reason. Um,
Yeah, and I love that because I mean, I think that makes, when you think about it holistically, and I'm looking at this from like this bigger picture of, okay, so we have like all the minute things, right? Like tracking those daily things that you're doing and stuff like that. But then like this is a broader topic too, where it's like, be careful how you're taking on debt, and really looking at, even though you might be caught up in life and stuff like that, but understanding that every time you sign your name on something, you are obligated to that. And looking at it in this bigger picture sense of, well, how is this going to affect you? Because I'm almost thinking of it too, like as you're taking on that debt, whether it's marital debt or what have you, um, you're setting yourself up for the future and what that looks like and how you're going to save and everything. So I
and debt to income
yeah,
ratio will also affect like interest rates and things like that.
yeah,
So you have to be caught, you may not need to help somebody else get a car, but you might want to get a car loan so you can have a car.
yeah.
That could affect what you might qualify for.
Yeah, and I think I would think too, like, so the hardship and all that too is, so like if you go through something unfortunately like a divorce, and then you're sitting there and these are the pieces that you're stuck with basically afterwards, and you're trying to rebuild on and trying to, I would say too, and Susan, maybe you can add to this. I think it would be like even recover from, right? I'm assuming there must be recovery that takes place.
Mhm.
Yes, for sure. And I think that it's going back to like the stability. It
Mhm.
is, I work with a lot of women that have gone through divorces, and so what'll typically happen is this is the settlement I have to pay, or this is the settlement I'm getting. What do we do now? And it is going back to the basics,
Mhm.
trying to really figure out what that plan is for them, because it's changing in the world today, that more and more women are being more involved in the planning stages of retirement, where before, and there's still women that don't want to know anything about the finances, and that's fine, but they need to have some kind of conversation or some sort of knowing where things are, that I try to encourage. But it is going back to the basics of finding out what are the next steps that we need to do and how to build off of those, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, honestly, this is giving me so much to think about. I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to start readdressing like my finances, like how I'm handling things. So I guess with that, like, Carol, I'd like to jump back for a second. If like when it comes to, this kind of like going through maybe the challenges or things that women could prepare in the event, that maybe a divorce happened or something like that. Um, are there any legal documents or considerations women should put into play to have prepared for, like, in case, that would set them up a little bit more for success?
Well, I would say that everybody needs to have, if you're over, say, 22 and you're out of college, I mean, I don't care if you're, just working at Belks until you get your job in your field kind of thing. Everybody needs to do a will. They need to do a healthcare power of attorney, and they need to do a living will. Now, those can all be modified at any point. You can put down, I want my sister to be my healthcare power of attorney. And then if you get married, you can switch it to your spouse, or maybe not. But you need to make sure that you are protected, because, even at 25, people get in accidents, people die, people get stricken with, terrible diseases. And so you want to make sure that you can speak for yourself. And when your wishes are known, when you can maybe no longer speak for yourself. And I say that because you have to be realistic. You know, maybe your spouse is the greatest spouse out there, but they're just not, they can't handle something like that. You know, the doctor, you're sitting there in the hospital with respirator, and the doctor is going, you know, should we pull the plug? And it won't obviously be that, you know, direct, but and maybe your spouse can't handle that, but your sister or your brother or your best friend or whoever can. And you know, you can depend on them to do what you want to be done. Um, because you don't need to have people arguing and fussing in the hospital. Don't you do that? That's, you know, all of that. The doctor's going to look at the paperwork. Um, One thing to understand in North Carolina, there's no such thing as like legal separation papers, um, and legal separation and all that stuff. I think that may be actually a term of art in some states, but not in North Carolina. You have to be separated, and that means living separate residences. Now, the residences can be across the street or next door, but it has to be a separate residence, not my spouse is in the stays in the downstairs bedroom and I stay upstairs. That's not separated. And you cannot get a divorce in North Carolina until you all have lived separate and apart for really a year and a day. You have to that year mark, and then you wait till the next business day, and then either party can file. And there's no such thing as I gotta, you know, you're not gonna get a divorce. I'm not gonna sign any divorce papers. That's all on television. Um, so you
Yeah.
need to understand that. And I
TV
say that
schedule.
because
Yeah.
I have heard people
Yeah.
say, I can never divorce my spouse because they said they wouldn't sign the divorce papers, so I can never get a divorce. And it's like, that is not true.
Oh my
That
goodness.
is not
Okay.
true.
Yeah. It's wild that stuff like television and social media and stuff, how much it can skew our perception of what's real. You
Yes, yes,
know?
yes. Um, and you know, parties can do, if you all are amicable enough, and some are, you can sit down and work out a separation agreement, which is really a contract that, okay, we got married and now we're
Mhm.
gonna live separate and apart, and you're gonna pay for this, and I'm gonna pay for that, and you know, whatever parts you can agree on, you can do it between the two of you. There are professional mediators, there are attorney mediators. Um, you can go to an attorney and the attorneys can negotiate on your behalf, um, and then work it out. And that's a lot of times the easiest way and the quickest way, because then that is the parties are actually saying, okay, this is what we want to do, as opposed to a judge telling you what you're going to do. And even in North Carolina, when you file for property settlement during a divorce, is called equitable distribution, and equitable means fair. And so they look at how is it fair. And they start with the premise that it's going to be 50-50, but that doesn't, there are many factors that can come into play as to why it would be less than 50-50 in one direction or the other. Just depends on the assets, um, the ability to work, the length of the marriage, any needs of the parties. You know, for example, if one parent's going to have primary placement of the children and they can afford it, they might get the possession of the marital home for the sake of the children. But that's none of that is necessarily a given. That's just sort of a general example. But before you would get to a judge in a hearing on the equitable distribution, you have to go to mediation. So
Mhm.
even then, you still have another chance to try to work it out
There you
without
go.
going to court. And the same thing for custody and visitation. You have to go to mediation on that. That is included, so to speak, with your filing fees. The property mediation is not. You have to pay the mediator, you have to pay your attorneys to go. But again, it's at least a chance to try to work it out between the parties, as opposed to a judge going, you get this and you get that, um, kind of thing.
I mean,
Um,
I will say too, it just sounds too, I keep hearing the dollar signs as well too, right? Like this is an expensive
it
process, right?
can
I
be.
mean, like
It
filing,
absolutely can
attorneys,
be.
sounds like too, obviously, if you go to court, that's another expense in itself too. I'm sure that that obviously adds up. As somebody who's also gone through a divorce, I know a little bit.
Mhm,
Ginny does as well, and I mean,
mhm,
we understand that there's some financial obligation here, and I think like it's an interesting thing that you can't be prepared for. Like that's a different burden in itself
mhm,
that it really it stings like and it really hurts. And I don't and obviously I don't think people can necessarily totally prepare for that part of the expense, right? Because nobody gets married and thinks, okay, like this is going to end horribly and I'm going to be in debt.
I'm going to set aside a divorce fund.
yeah.
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 So you're
Yeah.
not necessarily thinking that.
No. But like, I mean, with that, obviously, if we go back to Susan for a minute, if we get to the place though where, okay, they've gone through that, they're left with what they're left with. Are there some like I know we touched a little bit on this, I think, with the habits of like taking your receipts and stuff, but are there any like key financial habits or strategies that really have like the biggest impact on building long-term stability and confidence so that somebody can go from this place of devastation and having to funnel out all this money to feeling like they can breathe again and they
Yeah,
Mhm,
absolutely. Well, I think women especially like stability and security, right? At the end of the day, we like security. And so I take clients through a strategy of building their own custom financial house because everybody's different. Everybody has a different plan. Everyone has different plans with their expenses, where they want to live, and how they want to retire. And so when I use that example, I'm a visual person, so I've got to see something I've got to explain something so people can see where we're going with this. And so what I start with is the foundation. And the foundation of the house is all of your insurances, right? Your health insurance, your life insurance, long term care, disability income, um, car insurance, all that, etc. type of things. Now, everybody may not need all of those items, but those are the different things that we would look at and make sure that foundation is solid so that in the event there's a death or in the event that someone gets sick, um, we've got things, or an accident, we've got things in place. Then the walls of your custom house is your liquidity, your savings account. Um, Typically, rule of thumb is having at least 6 months in your savings account of what your monthly expenses are. Some people want to have more, some people want to have less. Again, that's why it's custom, because I can give you guidance on what I believe, but you're the one that's going to be doing the hard work and lifting, right?
Mhm.
And then on the top of the roof of the house is all of your investments, your retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, mutual funds, you name it. Because what typically happens is if you don't have that foundation and the walls built, if there's a crack in that foundation, whether it's a death or an illness, what happens? Everything starts to crumble and people start liquidating their investments because they've got to get out of that hole. They're in panic mode to make sure things are taken care of. So that's really where I like to start. And the clients that I've taken through that process, especially women coming out of a divorce or just single or married, they like that analogy because security is important to women, and they know that if it's not going to be the perfect plan, but it's starting to give you that. If two tires out of your four blow out in your car, you're not going to that credit card. You've got that emergency fund to take from to pay it, and that's where you stay out of that debt. So it takes a while, but that's where the check marks. And I constantly go back through and make sure that that house doesn't need any updates or new things, and we just continue every 6 months to a year looking at that plan to make sure the stability is still there. And it's a sleep at night factor, honestly, Tiffany. I mean, you need to be able to lay your head on the pillow and know that if something happens, I'm good. I'm going to be all right, especially when it comes to finance.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, this is so great for me because, like I said, I'm also taking some of this in, going, oh my gosh, but it's just it's there's so much of life happening around us, and this stuff, when we're confronted with it, and obviously, I think a lot of times, and I would, not speaking for you, but I would say most of you, both of you probably would agree, is that it's these life-altering events, right? That kind of bring stuff to the forefront and make it like it's in your face and you're really paying attention to it, where a lot of us are just, you kind of just go through life day to day, you get by, you just do your thing. And so, I think it's really interesting to think like of this differently, like, and really look at it from like the ground up. Like, I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people could probably start anywhere. We would all probably like to go back though and be able to start over and do it right the first time.
That's not always possible. Life is, we don't have a straight arrow of our path. Right. And everyone's different. So there may be already accounts that you have, then we plug those in, but then we look at where the shortfalls are. So absolutely.
Oh my goodness. I love this. I love this so much. This is so great. I know Ginny, I think Ginny is going to jump in with a couple questions here for y'all. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Yeah. So Susan, I just had a couple questions as we were kind of chatting through this. Also, I wanted to say that I like your suggestion with the protein drink about instead of every workout, every other, because I still like my little treats and I wouldn't want to have to give up my treats totally, but I think that's a smart way to handle it.
You won't do it. If I took everything away, you wouldn't do it, right? So
exactly. Exactly. We need that little incentive there.
I think what is that meme that goes around? It's like you could cut out coffee and reduce your life
will to live.
But you're by like 90%,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we need some of those things to keep us going, I guess, to kind of give the incentive to keep trying. I am curious though, no specifics needed, but Susan, if you had any like real life examples of women that, you helped kind of overcome a specific financial challenge, any kind of like anecdotal stories like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about this the other day, and I actually spoke to her yesterday because she texted me and she said 911 Susan Glass, and I was like, oh no, what's that? And it was nothing, but she just likes to give me a hard time. But so I met this lady. I've been in this industry 24 years, and I met this lady probably about 20 years ago. I cannot believe it. And she was in her 50s at the time, and she was referred to me, and I sat down with her, and she said, Susan, I'm never going to be able to retire. I do not want to. And she's really funny, but she's like, I do not want to eat cat food in retirement. Like, that's my goal. If you can make sure I don't eat cat food. I was like, okay, we can do that. And she was drowning in debt. She was living paycheck to paycheck. She worked in a very grueling industry. So she was working 70 hours a week. And so I took her through the process of looking at her budget, and it was very eye-opening because we have to find the money, right? You have the money. You just don't know where the money's going. When that check gets deposited, it's like gone, right? And so we went through that practice of looking through everything. And I will tell you, she's 70. She just turned 78 in March or in February, and she has been retired. She did it, and she's always like, thanks to you. But she did the hard work. I just guided her, but she's the one that made the sacrifices, and she's the one that looked at her account. So I will tell you, it's never too late, because a lot of people think I'm going to work till I'm 80. She retired at 67. She goes and sees her grandkids all the time. She's very happy. She's on a fixed income. So when the economy is the way it is and things are going up, inflation and so forth, it's a little challenging, but we just kind of look through every 6 months. We'll talk during this time, but it's really great to see her living her life that from I remember back then when we sat down and how scared she was. And it just makes me so happy, because I love working with individuals that when someone else is looking at your situation from the outside in, you have a different perspective than when you're in it, right? And so it was just giving her the encouragement that she could do it. And we had some bumps along the way, but she's retired and enjoying it. So
I love that. Oh my gosh.
something. So yeah, it's possible. It's just hard work. I mean, everybody's scared to look at the numbers, but it's really, it really can be done. It really can. So
That's a good point. I think a lot of people are just afraid to take that hard look at their expenses, or it's like they're making their credit card payments, but they don't really want to look at the credit card that closely to see what all is on there. I remember a tip I had read at one time was that easier said than done probably, but to try and take some of the emotion out of it by just looking at it as like data points, kind of like your jar of receipts. It's not a big deal that you spent, $50
right.
at Starbucks this month. It's just data. You're just looking at it. You're just going to kind of take a step back and analyze it so that you can know where you're at. Because if you're too afraid to look at it, you're not going to be able to really change anything, because you don't actually realistically know the situation you're in.
And not get stuck in the past, right? You made whatever financial decisions with what information you had at the time that you made them. And sometimes it's just survival. So, or I should have never bought that car, or I should have never bought this, or whatever. But okay, you did it. We have to move forward. And how are we going to do it? And so that's where a lot of times, looking at, like you said, the data points, and let's start today, figure out how we're going to pay for it, and then we'll continue. So you might, again, you might not get your protein shake every workout, but you could get it every workout. So yeah, for sure.
I did see Karen had a question. If apart from QuickBooks, are there any other like online programs or platforms or anything you can suggest that you like?
Let me look at I look at it every day, and I cannot remember for the life of me. Let me look at my phone real quick. That I actually use this personally, and I think, let me see, and it's QuickBooks is definitely one. Yeah, the one I use is Quick and Simplify, because it's just so good about being able to go in there. I get alerts like, you spent $4.20. How do you want to categorize it? So, when you're just sitting there waiting on some, just doing nothing, as we all sometimes find ourselves, you can just put a category to it really quick, and it goes to that source. That is the one I use personally. I know that some people that own different businesses, they love QuickBooks, because they are able to put it in different categories with their businesses and with their personal. So that's the simplified one is what I like, because it's just an app on my phone, and I'll get alerts, and it's easy. And then I just print it out, and I know exactly what I did for the month. So
I love that so much, that it gives you the alerts. In my mind, I'm picturing, I feel like when we used to use cash for everything, right? It's so much more accountable, because you hand somebody a $20 bill and you get the change back, and it's very, you can feel it, you can see it. And there's something so different now that, most things are on cards, and it's just, it's like Monopoly almost, so I love that gives you the alerts, because then you can, it kind of brings that same mentality and accountability back to the spending. So
absolutely. That's the same thing like with Apple Pay. Apple Pay is a very dangerous thing, because the fact that it's a reoccurring, but it's the same thing on this Quicken, that it comes to you and says there was an Apple Pay for this amount, and you put it in that category. So, but yeah, Apple Pay and debit cards change the way we purchase things for sure. And Amazon.
Oh, Amazon's the worst. First of all, can I just say, why did none of us get an invite to the wedding? I'm just saying.
Right. Yes. Mhm.
Oh my goodness. Judy, I think, did you have another question maybe
Yeah, I had one more for Susan. So your company, the Glass Group,
Uh,
outside of just kind of, you know, like hard numbers working like that, what other kind of resources or, education do you like to share with your clients?
you know, I will tell you a couple of things. What Carol said about getting the papers in line, every doing a plan is fantastic, but if you don't execute also those papers, like she said, so I have different seminars and stuff that I do with clients that I invite. I'm in Atlanta, so I invite local attorneys, estate planning attorneys, to talk about that, because everyone will say it's not going to happen in my family, and I think Carol can attest to this. It'll happen in your family. It does. It just happens when money's involved and emotions are involved. It's all out. Everyone can go. It's a very tough time. I currently mentor a couple of women in the financial service industry. I used to be a part of Women in Insurance and Financial Services. And so we were a membership nationally of about 1,000 women. And so trying to get more women in the industry is really important, because it used to be a very male dominant, and women, I think, like to work with women. Not all, but some majority of them do. And I think women just have a different approach to it. I work with a lot of divorce groups in the area and do different educational workshops for them. Just talking about basics all the way up to, settlement ideas of when they get the settlement, what would be the next steps. So I try to be out there in the community a lot. Numbers are numbers, but people are people. And so getting to know people and understand their situation is really important to me, because we're not talking about refrigerators. We're talking about important stuff about their finances, and being able to send their kid to college or retire at some point. So,
Oh gosh, and some of that stuff can, I think, when you're in the thrust of that upheaval and trying to figure things out, like that extra stuff like that, which is not extra, it's very important, but it feels so out of reach, because it's like, that's, oh, I can't, yeah, it's like this looming cloud kind of off in the distance, you know.
and it's very overwhelming. And I use the analogy of like eating an apple. We'll take a bite, we'll digest it, we take another bite. Because if you were to shove the whole apple in your mouth, you would choke. And
Mm-hmm.
you would walk away from it and say, I don't want to do any of it. So it is a process. It's not going to be a 1, 2, 3, but as long as, clients give me homework assignments and I give them homework assignments, because that's, to get the back and forth of what needs to be done. So
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I am getting so much out of this. Like my little wheels are just turning, and I'm very excited because I am going to take this all with me. Um, I love this. So I wanted to jump back to Carol real quick and just ask, so like on what advice do you have? So when somebody is kind of going through some of this legal side of rebuilding and stuff, right? What do you have any advice that you would be able to share, just with people to help them navigate that time?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think one thing to remember is, um, this too shall pass. It may be, it's not something anybody wants. It's not something anybody expects. And some marriages break up quickly, others can have decades of being happy and compatible, and then something happens and then that stops. So I mean, it's one of those things. I think generally speaking, one thing I would say to women in particular, but to everybody in general, is just have a support group, a support around you, friends. Um, have one thing I do see, maybe not as much as I did when I first started, but I still see it, is women who put everything into the marriage. their whole entire existence, regardless of whether they work. They could be working at a factory, they could be, the upper management of a big corporation. But aside from work, their whole life is, you know, cleaning the kids' rooms and cooking breakfast for their husbands. And that's great. That's great. That's great. That's great. But they never do anything for themselves. Oh, I can't be on that committee because, I got to take the kids to all of their events. Oh, I can't be in that club or whatever because, I got to, you know, at some point do something for you
I love
and
that.
have a life of your own. Yes, your family should come before a club meeting. I mean, yes, but at some point, and I think of my mother and I think of the ladies in my neighborhood. They all managed it. They all had husbands. They all had children. They all had jobs, but yet they still managed to have some part of a life for themselves, be it their organizations, be it church, be it, whatever was that had their interest. And I think that's one thing. And so when women when they're around other positive women and people who lift them up and are supportive, then if the unthinkable happens, you still have that support. And what I see is so many women will stay in a relationship, be it a marriage or a relationship, because I don't have, he paid for everything. I don't know where anything is. I don't know where any of that, I don't know how to do any of that. And well, what am I going to do if I'm not, in that relationship? And so that's just sort of one thing in general. Being married doesn't mean you stop being an individual or a person.
Yeah.
And, both spouses should have outlets other than just your spouse.
I agree.
Shirley Ralph, the actress, she's on Abbott Elementary. She's Mrs. Howard, the kindergarten teacher. She and her husband have been married for, I know, over 20 years. And I don't think they've lived in the same state at any point, maybe except right after they got married. He's a legislator in
Wow.
Pennsylvania, and she's an actress, so she might be in California filming Abbott Elementary. She may be in New York on a talk show. She may be in a number of places, and they have truly a commuter marriage. And she says part of the why it works is they don't have time to kind of get on each other's nerves. They when they're together, they really
They found
enjoy
the
it,
secret.
and
Yeah.
they're happy to see each other. And then it's like, well, okay, I gotta go. So they keep the freshness, of it going. I mean, I know obviously most people don't have their resources either, but um, but have an outlet for yourself. I mean, that doesn't really have anything to do with the law, but I think that people who have that outlet, that have that support, um, it's a horrible situation when a divorce happens, but they can tend to get through it a little. I never say there's not a good way to do any of it, but less bad or less
Yeah.
stressful.
Oh, I love that so much, and I think that really that ties in. This is a whole holistic lifestyle, and so when you're rebuilding, right, you have to not just super focus. I think Susan, when you mentioned two people sometimes just try to dump everything all at once and just fix it real quick and just invest and just try to make all the money and really taking that step back, taking a deep breath, taking care of yourself, making sure not just your financial ducks, but that you have the people around you that you need so that you can feel, strong and confident and balanced, right? And because it all goes together so that you can not just rebuild your finances, but yourself too, because that comes all this comes with a lot of anxiety and stress and just you know changing how you view the world even, and so just trying to recenter. I love that. I think that's wonderful advice. um okay, well, I think Susan, do you have similar? Do you have any advice that you would like to tie on to that?
The only thing I would say is anything that you read out there or anything that people tell you, or it is your plan. It is, things are customized for you. And you have to remember that, because what somebody else is doing may not fit in your plan. And I think a lot of people get really bogged down by that. Well, so and so's doing this, but they don't know the whole. I mean, we clearly don't always know all the ins and outs about other people's finances. It's a very sacred conversation. And so what my husband and I may have, it could be completely different than what someone next door has. And so what we might be doing in our planning stages or in our insurance or whatever is different. And so that's where you have to stay focused on. It's about you and your plan. That's the biggest thing, because there's so much more information out there in the world of the internet than we have ever had before. And you have to just remember, some people are talking to the masses. And when they're talking to the masses, they're giving general guidance and advice. And so that's really, sometimes people need to have that permission to know, hey, it's okay if you're not doing that at this point, because you may not be at that point yet. And so that sometimes can bother clients, that why am I not making this or whatever, because we're not there yet, but we'll get there. Because guess what? There's going to be one person you're going to be looking at if you don't get to retirement, and that's me. So we're going to get there. We just have to take the time in the process. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I just think too, we as women, we're so hard on ourselves. And
absolutely.
it's like, we create these own metrics for us to, and hurdles for us to jump over. And it's really our own.
It's all exhausting.
Yeah, it's so exhausting. We just got to. And the great thing, and I love, and I appreciate both of you so much for being a part of this conversation, is because I think the biggest takeaway I would like people to get from this is like that you don't have to do it all alone. You can find amazing, incredible people that are able to support you, that understand what you're going through, that have seen it before. You're not going to shock. You're not, and outside of just the friends you have, you can seek the proper counsel to really just help you navigate these times in life, and you don't have to sit there just kind of stewing in the exhaust of it all. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, so I just want to say thank you so much. So I'm going to start closing out. So thank you so much to Susan Glass and Carol Goins. Thank you for being here today. Before we close, really quick, I just want to make sure that we give anybody listening to this the ability to be able to connect with you guys. So I would like to ask you both just to share with us just any information, how people can connect with you, if there's any resources you have that you'd like to share, anything that how you'd like people to contact you, that would be great. So Susan, I'd like to start with you and just see from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I can be reached. My email address is susan@theglassgroup.biz, or I'm on LinkedIn. I definitely would be completely open. There's a Calendly on my email address. If you want to shoot me an email, I would be happy to do an hour consultation at no charge, just to see where things are at and if there's any guidance I can help with that. There's all kinds of different resources on my LinkedIn page. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk to anybody. Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. That's a great resource right there. I'm just saying. All right. And then Carol, how about with you?
I just put my email in the chat. It is attycgoins@aol.com. I'm old. I never felt like changing my email. It works. It works.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, AOL still's around.
It works.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I know you're in North Carolina, obviously. So that's where you have your law firm. So
I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. I serve Buncombe County.
Perfect. Well, Thank you both. And I just want to encourage anybody watching this, to connect with these ladies. They are a wealth of knowledge and obviously have a huge passion for working with women and helping encourage them and get them through these times in life. So I just also want to say a special thank you to all of our sponsors who make these events possible. It's so important. We want to keep growing this community. So you can see and find out more about them on our donation page at womenformentors.com/donate. And also, if you'd like to support us and our mission to empower women through mentorship, education, and connection, please consider making a donation as well, because this just helps us keep growing this and keep helping more people as they start over and get on their journeys. If you haven't already, I would encourage people to follow us on LinkedIn to stay connected for future events. And if you or someone you know has an inspirational journey or message to share, please reach out to me directly. We're always on the lookout for inspirational stories for future roundtable discussions. Don't forget that we have our scholarship available and it's open. So please share about our scholarship, share with people you know, and let them know that it's available. So I just want to say thank you all for being here so much today. We have another one down in the books. Woohoo! And just, from all of us at Women for Mentors, let's just keep rising together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.